Hi everybody, I'm Jeff Ritchey from the Adult and Community Education Program at IUP, and I'm going to be speaking with you today about conducting a literature review for your coursework. I want to make it clear that in the brief time I have to speak with you, we won't be covering everything that you'll need to know about doing this, but giving you an overview and providing you with the foundation to conduct your research. And any specific questions that you have, then you can clarify with your instructor. I think this is a good definition, actually, for a literature review, and that's the process of identifying, reading, analyzing, summarizing, and evaluating scholarly materials regarding a specific topic. Now, it's important that you recognize in that definition that this isn't simply reiterating the research that other people have done on a specific topic, but that it requires you, that in addition to doing that, that you're going to provide some analysis of that research and some evaluation of the rigor of that research, limitations of that research, and where you believe research in that field should be headed. Literature reviews typically do two things. The first is that they summarize and they assess the literature in an area. And the second is that they provide a foundation for new and original research to be done subsequent to that. This work, what you'll be doing for your projects, typically focuses on what we call peer-reviewed publications or journals. And by that, what I mean is that the research and the articles that you'll be reviewing for this should, for the most part, have gone through a vetting process. And that's what peer-reviewed journals do. An academic or a researcher will submit their article for publication, and it will then be distributed to other reviewers who have expertise in that field. And they will provide insights, comment on limitations in the research, give feedback to the writer, who will then make revisions before it's published. So the idea is that materials from a peer-reviewed journal are more valid, that the conclusions are more rigorous and justifiable and superior to those that would just be published in the popular press. Now, before we begin to discuss actually doing the project and formatting the project, we probably want to talk about what might be the most important aspect of this process, and that's selecting your topic. And I can provide you with some tips for selecting your topic, but for the most part, that's going to be up to you, and it's going to be up to the things that interest you and the things that you're passionate about. Finding a topic typically begins in one of three areas, I think. First are your personal interests. What is it that you find, what is it that you're curious about? The second is something that's work-related. And for many of you, I know you're in this program trying to gain skills and credentials that will help you in the workplace. And this is a chance for you to really address some topics that you might be interested in specifically, and to go out and find what research has been done in those areas. And the third is current events, things that are important in the world right now, and things that you're reading about in the popular press that you want to really see how much we know about them, not just what you're reading in the papers, but how much we know about them. And once you've kind of gone through this process of thinking broadly about what you might want to examine, the difficulty then is to narrow that subject and to make it something that you can manage within the structures of this assignment. I would encourage you to begin broadly, not to try to refine your topic too much initially, but to begin looking at the literature that's out there in a very broad area first, to look for themes across that area, that topic, ideas that are recurrent, or things that are intriguing to you or of special interest to you. And don't discount those things that might be useful to you as well. So I think it's a matter of bringing together what you're interested in, but also those things that can be helpful to you in your career and elsewhere. So where do you begin? Where do you begin doing your research? Well, all of you should have access to the IUP libraries. And in the IUP libraries, there is a link, and the library site you can see on the PowerPoint is www.iup.edu/library. On that site, there is a link to article databases. And within that link, there is another link to a site called EBSCOhost. And I think EBSCOhost is probably the place that you're going to want to begin searching for the literature in your area. EBSCOhost allows you to go in and to select broadly from a variety of databases in education, social sciences, political science, philosophy, history, religion. It's really a massive amalgamation of other smaller databases, and it can be searched very efficiently. Remember to include in what you'll need to do when you go into EBSCO is select the areas that you want to have included in that search, and one of the databases that you'll want to be sure to include is the ERIC database, which is a database specific to education. And also on that search page, remember to click the box for peer-reviewed, which will get you just peer-reviewed journals, and also, since you're working at a distance, to click the box for full text. And that will allow you to get the full text of any articles that are available full text, which will be the majority of them. And you'll get the entire article and not just an abstract or a synopsis. Once you've done that, and once you've looked through the literature and you've identified themes and you've selected a topic and you're ready to write, you're going to want to organize this. And literature reviews typically use 4 broad organizing themes. That is, they have an introduction, which gives a statement of the topic that you're addressing and speaks to its significance in the field. Why is this subject important? The second is a methods section, which provides some insight as to how you went about researching the literature. If you've had certain parameters that you've used, you've only looked in specific databases, or you've ruled out studies in psychology as opposed to studies in sociology, and why you would have done that. Or maybe you even restricted it by time frame. You've only looked at the research in the last 5 years. Next is a section that I would call the literature, which really is your summary and synthesis of all of those materials that you've gathered. And then the last would be conclusions, which would provide some assessment of the current state of that literature. So what's significant or appears to be significant? What's missing or under-researched? What focus or foci has the research used to the exclusion of maybe other areas? And lastly, what are the implications of this research for future research? What does it seem that you could do next now that you know what's already been studied? Now, inside of those 4 broad areas, probably the one that you'll struggle the most with will be that big area called the literature, that summary and synthesis area. And you can typically organize that in a variety of ways, but the ways that I think you'll find most useful would be either thematic, so that you look at broad themes in the literature. The second would be chronological, so you just start with the oldest research that you found and move forward to the most recent. And the last would be to divide it into specific parts that you've identified. So if there is a history aspect to it, and there is a methods aspect to it, and maybe a theory aspect to it, that you could break it up into those broad areas that don't really correspond to themes, and they don't really correspond to chronological times. But again, I want to make it clear that, and the phrase would be, it's discursive, that literature reviews are discursive, meaning that they identify and they synthesize themes, they note shortcomings, they assess strengths, and provide suggestions for future research. And it's important that when you do this, as much as providing the information, that you go back to the beginning, once you've gathered all of this up, and you read through it so that you see that it builds and that it flows and that the ideas are connected in some way one to another. The next thing I want to talk about, maybe the thing that people struggle with the most, and that is the academic citation for literature reviews. In education, we typically use APA style, which is the American Psychological Association style. Your instructor will likely have given you something that looks like this, which is a little APA style cheat sheet that you will probably find very useful. If you come across citations that you don't find in this, you may find it useful to just go ahead and to buy the APA Style Manual. This is the 6th edition of the APA Style Manual. You can get it online, you can get it through Amazon, or you can get it through APA, and it really is a very useful guide, and if you buy it early in your program, I'm sure you'll use it over and over again. And lastly, if you struggle, as most of us do, with grammar and punctuation and capitalization and those kind of things, Macmillan still publishes the Elements of Style and the Elements of Grammar, which are really nice, handy, convenient, and inexpensive texts on what should be capitalized and what shouldn't, and how to do that in a way that fits well with the APA Style Guide. Lastly, and in closing, I can provide you with some tips. The first of those is to begin doing this now. The literature review seems like something that you can put off and that's fairly simple, but what ends up happening is that you start with a very broad subject and you find that it is difficult to narrow it down. So I would encourage you to begin at the outset looking around and beginning to think about what you want to do for your literature review. Be methodical in your database searching and keep track. You can actually print the search sheets out so you know what databases you've searched and what search terms you've used. Use existing reference lists. So if you have a book or a journal article, and at the back of that it has a list of references, use those references to snowball and to look at what other people have already discovered in their reviews of the literature. Try to stay focused. It is difficult because as you're going through this process, you can always be moving in tangents, and the internet certainly allows us to do that, and you find yourself in places that aren't really relevant to what you're studying. And lastly, I would encourage you to have fun. It's rare that you get an opportunity to pick a subject and to really study it. Think carefully about what interests you and what you're passionate about, and have a good time in this process. And that's it. Thank you.